When is the last time you listened to a podcast about web development, web design, and small business and didn't fall asleep? Yes, we cover web development, web design, and small business, but like actual human beings with personalities. If you're a beginner, we're not going to talk over your head. It's more like asking your buddy for help. We have guests, we have fun, and let me tell you, these two can get off on a tangent. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to HTML All the Things Podcast. This is Matt Lawrence and Mike Curran.
That's right, everybody. We are back, and this is the HTML All the Things podcast. This episode is titled Mentoring Developers with Shashi Lo. Shashi Lo is a senior software engineer at Microsoft and founder of Gridiron Survivor, an open source NFL survivor pool SaaS application that's designed to help the junior developers working on it further their skills and knowledge through real-world experience. Unlike self-taught personal projects, Shashi walks us through how his mentees on the Gridiron Survivor project are guided through corporate standards such as writing clean code and covering all the bases with proper testing. Concepts that may seem superfluous on small portfolio projects, but are a must-have in a corporate setting. Now, I'm not going to cover anything else. We're going to let Shashi tell us himself when we cut to this call right now. All right, everybody, we have Shashi on the line here. And before we jump into this loaded episode, Shashi, what's up? What's going on? What are you even working on?
Yeah, thanks for having me on this show. Things I've been working on, obviously, I'm on the Azure pricing calculation team. So lots of things going on at work. We just launched a new product onto the Azure portal, which is really cool. Where finally have the ability to calculate costs as you're going to the virtual machines service. And now you can kind of see an estimation of how much things are going to cost, then depending on size, depending on the type of virtual machine, all that. On the other side, I've been working on an apprenticeship program called Gridiron Survivor. I interviewed a lot of junior engineers and looked at a lot of portfolios, and I was like, there's something missing. Like all these individuals, some of them are cool and all, but I wanted to talk to them to kind of see where they were at. But in talking to them, I saw that there was this missing gap. They didn't have real world experience. They didn't understand how to time box. They didn't understand how to work together as a team. There was just a lot of skills that were missing. And so this apprenticeship program hopefully fills in those things that are missing for them.
Super cool. And just some context on all this too, like Shashi and I have been connected on Twitter, or X, I guess now, for several years now, I think. And I think the first thing I saw from you was essentially you reviewing developer portfolios. And you've been doing that for a long time now. And I always thought that was a super cool initiative because it's difficult to do that. I've done it before. And the challenge there is like, first of all, you can't spend a lot of time on each one. And second of all, giving good critical feedback is tough because you don't want to, hurt their feelings. But on the other hand, like, what's the point of giving them a review without, actually giving them something to improve? So that balance is very difficult. And I thought I always thought that you were able to handle that pretty well. And that's like the other side of that coin is that I'm not good with that stuff. Like I'm not good at giving critical feedback. That's something that I've been trying to improve on over the last several years since I've become a lead and done a lot of PR stuff. So that it was always something I watched from like a learning perspective from the side of like, how do I give the good feedback? But I also can see how like super important it was for the people that you were reviewing. So it's interesting the evolution that you've gone through. And just to kick this kind of off here, I'm curious to see like from your own perspective, you've been in the industry for a while now. It's been like around a decade or something like that, maybe more. And can you give a background like when you were getting into the industry? Is there something that like pushed you? Is there someone that mentored you? Was there like an event in your life where you're like, I want to do this for other people as well?
Yeah, that's very interesting. I was asked this last time and I didn't know how to answer it because the truth is I didn't have a mentor. Like I work with peers, I work with managers, but I don't call them mentors because I work directly with them, right? I would call a mentor someone that you can go to anytime you want about work issues, personal issues, and growing pains and stuff like that. A manager is going to do that no matter what. But a mentor, you can go to them for anything. Like you can tell them all the bad stuff that's happening at work and there's no repercussions there, right? Like they're just going, yep, I've been through that situation. I can help you out. So me, as I was growing up, I did not have a mentor. I had several people kind of not guiding me, but like just giving me suggestions and whatnot. And I think that's why I have such a big passion for it, because it took me twice as long to get to where I am. And I want to help others. I just feel like I have a helping heart where I want to help individuals get to where they want to go to and in a shorter amount of time. And the way to do that is like exactly what you said, Mike, is giving them kind of honest, constructive feedback. I was on X, like we've been on there for like 2, 3 years. And early on, I kept seeing people post things that just weren't honest, right? Somebody else would post up a project and say, hey, give me feedback. And everybody would be like, oh, this is so great. This is the best thing in the world. And I'm like, how are they going to learn that what they built was not very good? And they need to understand that and understand how to get better, how to achieve going to where they need to go to. Because if they think they're good enough with what they have, they're going to go apply for a job or go interview someplace and think, hey, I'm good enough. 30,000 people told me I was good enough. And you're telling me I'm not? You're wrong. And it's like, no, they're just not honest with you. And so I noticed that. And I said, you know what? Let's do some portfolio reviews and dig into the crux, because these individuals, they need to know. Like sometimes I'll get some portfolios and I'll be like, this is not good at all. In a nice way, like this is not good at all. I would recommend you using a template, because you have amount of 1 to 2 seconds or 3 seconds for a hiring manager to look at it and be appeased by it. Because most of the times we have hundreds of applicants, right? How are we going to spend 1 minute each on 100 applicants? We don't have that time. I barely have time in my schedule now. And so I only have a few seconds to look. And if it's eye-catching, I'm going to move on to the next thing. Like, okay, now let's look at your projects. Let's dig deeper into your projects. Let's look at your code. Now let's dig into the person, right? But I can't get there if your portfolio isn't pleasing and isn't aesthetically pleasing to me. And that just brought me up to like, when I hear people say, hey, yeah, you're doing a great job. This looks great. Keep going. I'm like, no. Like, be honest with me. Give feedback. If it's great, great. But if it's not, what can I work on? Because I'm always a person that wants to get better and wants honest feedback and get gains and continue to progress with whatever I'm doing.
This reminds me a lot of the conversation we had with Clark Sell, like the guy who runs that conference, because we had like a conversation about people being in a community but not really being there. Like they're very transactional, where they like kind of pop in and say, I need help with this, and then they sort of disappear. But the comments, like you were saying, the positive comments on X, where everyone was just sort of like, yay, hooray, this is an amazing, whatever calculator or whatever it is you built, this is amazing, I love it. It's sort of like, yeah, but maybe 2 of the buttons don't work. Why is no one saying that? And so everyone's just sort of being like, well, I have to engage on X today, so I better like write, that's so great, and didn't even click the link maybe.
Yeah, I mean, that's so true. Is sometimes they're just giving you praise to keep you going, which is great and all, but you can do both still. You can say, hey, Mike, great job on this. I reviewed this. Here are some things that I would improve on. You're doing a great job. Keep going. But if you want to take this to the next level, here's A, B, C that I recognize that you can fix and make it better, right? So it doesn't always have to be like, hey, this is horrible. Like, redo everything. It sucks. No, it's like giving honest feedback, but at the same time, providing an entryway in, right? It's always, I don't know what to call it, but it's that soft blow, like saying, giving them a little praise and then giving them the crux of the meat, saying, hey, like, here's, a list of things that you can improve on. But I praise you first to soften the blow, so you understand that, I'm not just like here to put you down. This is a lot of work, but here are things that if you really want to get to where you want to go to, here are some things you can work on right away.
Do you find, or have you found any portfolios or any sort of example projects even where like even that's a challenge? Like it's just so far away from what you'd expect that it's sort of like, oh, I'd like to soften the blow, ideally on paper, but maybe this is just, maybe it's ugly and it doesn't work, for example, something, it's just a big mess. Like, how do you handle that? Do you still try to soften the blow in a way, or?
Yeah, like there are a lot of projects and portfolios I've seen that just don't cut it, right? And it's tough to be like, hey, like this looks great, but here's what, usually I'm like, hey, I just want to be honest with you, right? And let you know that this isn't up to par. Here's what you can do, right? When I see portfolios or projects, like mostly projects that are just kind of plain and simple, like to-do apps or calculators, right? I'm like, hey, I just want to let you know this project is probably not good enough for you to get an interview. What I recommend is you to go to Front End Mentor or another site that gives you projects to work on. At least that's a good start because you're working with industry standard designs. People will review your project as well as you're done and whatnot. And at least that gives you further along, right? Because then you can't necessarily say, oh, this is like not good enough and not giving any direction. Giving them some sort of guidance is good. And yeah, like I don't want to beat around the bush either, right? Like I've seen some reviewers are like, oh yeah, this is not bad. If you do this, you can fix this, you can fix that. I'm like, no, I'm sorry. Like here, just redo it. But it's a good start. But I just want to let you know that when you go to a hiring manager to review this or HR to review this is not going to pass their tests. And by saying why, I think they understand more of where I'm coming from, opposed to saying, I don't think this is good enough. No, I'm telling you that the general hiring manager is not going to even take a look at this.
Do you think that like the results are skewed in a way? So what I mean by that is, do you think that if somebody has gone through traditional school, is there a higher chance of them having a good portfolio versus self-taught? Because we hear a lot in the community that people that are self-taught obviously are, just self-taught. So maybe they don't have a mentor or they don't have someone to reach out to, or they're just going, like you said, on X and posting the 100-day challenge or whatever it is. And then they're getting praised just for, being there, kind of saying like, hooray, you did your 100 days and you did your 4 projects or whatever challenge it is they're undertaking. But do you think that there's, maybe like a bit of difference there where if someone comes from a traditional school, they typically have better projects? Is that safe to say? Or
I'd say a greater percent of them, yes, but it's tough to say that all of them would, because I've seen some self-taught individuals that come out with project. I'm like, whoa, like, where have you been? Like, this is great, but it's very rare, right? The chances of those people hitting and being superstars, as I call them, are much rarer. Whereas those individuals that have structure, that go through, proper training and stuff like that, they are building their fundamentals. And sometimes you can't showcase that, right, in a project or in your resume or whatnot. It comes out when they start working. And that is one piece of the Gridiron Survivor too, is a lot of these individuals, they are self-taught or they went to boot camps. And they told me themselves is they were never taught how to go through a sprint or do stand-ups or even like work as a team cross-functionally. And in seeing them, I can tell that, they didn't have that foundation. Whereas somebody that went to maybe a CS major or something has the fundamental pieces, because they would go through a little bit of that and to understand the software cycle, then they would understand that a little bit more. But it's hard to put that out there, right, in your portfolio or resume. And so that's where I see that there's a little bit of a gap, but any kind of apprenticeship would help both individuals. But it depends on the person and how far they've gotten, right? Some will take a shorter route and some they need to stay in the program a little bit longer.
It's super insightful. Like all the little nuances, the whole journey of application, like the first thing that anyone would see, or even like maybe just like a randomizer would see, is your resume. That's the first step. And then the next one is probably the portfolio. And then the next one is like more in depth into the portfolio with what you were saying, like work experience, projects and stuff like that. And then after that, if you get past all those barriers, then you're talking about, interviews. That's another whole barrier. And that could be a huge barrier for people. And then you have the barrier of like the first 3 months on the job, which I think people don't talk about a lot as well. And I think that's a lot where I think Gridiron Survivor is focusing on. I think it helps with all of it across the board, in my opinion, because it gives you the confidence to go into the interview. It gives you stuff to write on your resume. It probably gives you some skills to do that. Like, I think it's good for the whole stack. But realistically, those first 3 months, if you can't handle the software development lifecycle and all of that, what comes with it, which is quite a lot, yeah, like some people might get out, like burn out immediately.
I totally agree with everything you said, Mike. And it's tough because I've had some interns come in and I'm like, okay, they'll do fine. They couldn't even commit something to GitHub. Like they didn't even know how to write a message. Even though I showed them like, here, use a GUI. Here, I'll make it simple for you. Just use this, click on these buttons and submit. They couldn't even do that. And so it was like, wow, like, what did they teach you in school? Like, I'm sure some of them don't teach them how to like use repos and whatnot, like just to build code. That's fine. But there's some basic skills that some of these individuals didn't even have. And I was like, if I'm going to have you for the next 3 months, it's gonna be a long 3 months. Whereas a apprenticeship like Gridiron Survivor, like we're going through the whole cycle. We're building a brand new project, right? And so I had them go through the high level design where they are going to research their topics, their technologies. Even though we knew we were going to use something, I said, look at a competitor. Tell me why we're using this. Like research why. Like go deep into the documentation. Tell me why. And that way they understood what they were going in with and they were trying to build something. And then along the way, right, sprint planning, Scrum every day, asynchronous, and then some Tuesdays and Thursdays we'll do it in a meeting, simulating like the hybrid model. And then also at the same time, I split them up into 3 different groups: backend engineers, functional front-end engineers, and UX engineers. And then we have an industry designer that I've worked with for several years, and myself. And so now there's 5 different departments, right? And I always tell them, like, when they ask for help, I'm like, go to the backend team. Go talk to them first before you talk to me, right? And then figure it out. Like, I can give you the answer, sure, but you need to understand that there's formality. Like, if I was your manager, I would be busy all day long and have no time for you. So you need to go figure it out, reach out to the other team, see if they can help you out, reach internally if they can help you out. If not, sure, work up the funnel, right? Work up to me. Because that piece alone, the communication was extremely difficult for them to understand. Like they were just trying to spam us and all stuff. I'm like, that's cool, but here's the reality: is I'll be busy, and I am busy with my day job too. And some of y'all are available during the day. So if you work together, you can actually come up with these solutions together. At the same time, you're cross-pollinating. You're allowing each other to learn what you're building. And as you build this project or build these features, you start to understand like what each team is doing. You may not be an expert in the back end, but you know what they're trying to do, what they're trying to build. And so this piece was a really key piece for these individuals to go with. And by putting and being like, you've seen my portfolio reviews, like I'm very stern when strict with them. The reason why is because on the job, they're going to be the same. Like if the quality doesn't meet the bar, they're going to tell you and say, hey, go redo this or go write unit tests for that. And that's exactly what I do for these individuals. I don't let it go by unless if it meets the standards. It doesn't have to be pristine or perfect. It cannot be just spaghetti code. No way. It has to be code that is well written, understood, and all of that. And that piece alone, like these individuals will say, okay, let's do a sprint planning. A 1-day ticket they thought took 2 weeks because of the quality of code they were pushing out. Plus, they didn't have any experience with unit testing. So I would grind them and I would say, go write a unit test for this function. Nope, go write a unit test for this condition, all that. And they're like, are you serious? I'm like, yes. And that pushed them more, even though up front, these tickets took longer. Now, most of these individuals have been with this program for 6 months to 8 months. And now with the 1-day ticket, it's taking maybe 3 days instead of 2 weeks, right? And sometimes it's way faster. Some individuals are picking this up way faster. And by being able to stop them and say, hey, you know what, like this is okay, but you need to add additional tests to this. Or you wrote this test, which is fantastic, but you missed the edge case or a condition. You missed the else statement. You need to cover that as well. And by doing that, they now don't have to worry about, sometimes they don't have to worry about what I had to say in the reviews. They're like, oh, Shashi's going to tell me to do this anyway, so I'm going to have to do it. I'm like, yeah, exactly. So do that. And what's also cool is that they're also reviewing each other's PRs, and they're taking these standards and reviewing other individuals' PRs and bringing that standard there. And so they're increasing their ability to understand code and understand how to read code.
What's your thoughts on the other side of the fence a little bit? So there's like sort of your standard, like stand-ups and sprints and those sort of things. But there's definitely companies out there that will either, use a hybrid of that where it's kind of like their proprietary system tacked onto it. And there's certainly companies that use, a fully proprietary system. Commonly, if the company's like security centric, they, kind of security by obfuscation, they don't want anyone to know how their devs work, what the work cycle is, etc. So what is your thought on that? Or how do you prep sort of apprentices or students in that, or can you? Because, just to sort of speak from a personal note, like one of the things I really struggled with, I used to work in an IT department, and then I moved to R&D, but I was the sysadmin, and they were throwing around terms like all over the place, and it was not standard terms because they were building like different like builds for whatever apps and yada yada, and I was just there to like make sure the servers were working, and they would come to me with different things, and I'm like, guys, like, I'm sorry, like, I don't know what you're saying a bunch of words, it's word soup, right? It's not standard words. Like, I know my work cycle, I know work orders, and I know my thing, tickets and all the rest of it, but you guys have to translate. And it was kind of the same thing where you were like, hey, these people are busy, yada yada, but I was like, but it's proprietary, I can't even look this up. Like, there's no way for me to Google this. There's no one else to ask. I'm the sysadmin, working that day. Now, thankfully, I was a co-op, so I did have someone that was there to help me. But if that person was also busy, it's sort of like, now what do you do? And I equate that to the same experience that like a new employee would have. I was a co-op, but if someone had just come in and been hired actually in my position, it wasn't just a co-op. Like, do you think that the company has any sort of responsibility or role there? Because like I was losing productivity just due to like almost like a language barrier just in tech, because I didn't know what they were saying for the first couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's exactly how I felt when I got to Microsoft. They were throwing these acronyms out like ACD, POD. I'm like, what did you say? like, even though they had this long list of like, here's all the acronyms, I'm like, dude, why do you guys have so many acronyms? Like, I can't communicate that way. It took time, right? But at the same time, like, as if they have that list for you, then it's like, okay, I'm gonna do my due diligence and try to not memorize them, but when you say it, I gotta go, rehearse it and say, okay, what is AACD? Like, okay, what does that mean again? Okay, let's say it over again. And then I'll reiterate that with them, like say, oh, did you mean, this group? Okay, yes, no, okay, then what does ACD stand for? Because it's not in the acronym list, then they will tell me. But to that case, this is a really cool thing that I do with these individuals on Gridiron Survivor. I have a task for them, and sometimes it takes me like a minute to do, right? But I give it to them anyways. And I say, here, go learn this. And they'll go do it for a day. They'll come back and say, hey, Shashi, I'm stuck on this. Can you help me? And I say, yeah, here, go look at this documentation. And they're like, wait, what? Why can't you just give me an answer? I'm like, because you need to train yourself how to find those answers. If I give you the answer, the next time, what are you going to do? You ask me again. But if I can train you to, debug or find solutions, you're going to have those tools in your belt to use for next time. Every scenario may be different, and some of them will be similar. But the more you train your brain on how to find solutions and how to debug and stuff like that, it's going to help you along the way. I had this individual that had this bug. We were looking at it, and I was like, okay, what's the issue? They told me about it. I was like, do you see the issue? They're like, no. And I was like, it's right there on line 17. They're like, what's on line 17? Like, your condition is wrong. And they're like, oh, I didn't notice that. And they're like, how did you know that? I'm like, from 17 years of debugging, saw it right away. But for you, you may not see that because, you're fresh and you're still learning and stuff like that. But if I can push you to train you and give you these tips and tricks to find solutions and debug, then hopefully you'll continue to learn, right? And I think that's one thing too, is the company has to do a good job of onboarding. I mean, I've been to several companies and most of them are bad. Like they'll have this doc, it's outdated or it's okay. And then you go on and like, it's completely missing how to, set up the server. Oh, they're like, oh, whoops, go do this. And like, okay. And so it's just like, it's a give and take. But obviously, when I tell these individuals like this cohort or this apprenticeship, it's only a start. Not everybody runs it this way, but it gives you a head start. Because when you go and work for a different company, it might be an agency where they have no process at all, right? And you're just a committee, but communication is key. Or if you go to a software company, then the whole process is important and you need to like go step by step. And so it just depends on where they go. But this allows them to get a head start, to kind of learn. And by being kind of stingy with them on their code and stuff like that, I hope that they get somebody that's not as strict. That way they're like, oh, yeah, Shashi was so strict with me. I can, code review or I can write these features really well for you. And if they do get somebody strict, then it's like, oh, this person has gone through the grind and they understand what's needed for the team and whatnot. And that also stands out too. I had an individual that went to a company after I think 4 or 5 months. He got an internship with them. They interviewed hundreds of candidates and he stood out because he went through this whole process. And I talked to them as they were hiring him. They're like, yeah, he stood out because he's been through the agile process, Scrum, that your tech stack's very similar to ours. The way you guys run your sprint boards, because I share those occasionally, what we're doing. And they're like, yeah, it's similar to how we run it. And I just talked to him last week, and he said, yeah, like, even though I had zero experience, Gridiron Survivor really helped me because when I went to work for them for the first week, it felt like I just stepped into their company, but we're still doing the same thing. And I was like, that's very cool. Obviously, there's some little things that were different, but I was like, that's very cool. That's a great testimony to what we're doing because it may not be picture perfect process to process, but it gives you an idea of what you're stepping into as a software engineer.
Your system, although rigid, it probably will be more chaotic in real life. That's the thing. And that's the unfortunate realization that people will make when they join the workforce. And it's good to at least give them some taste of that. So I think it's going to be appreciated, if not appreciated already. It's going to be super appreciated when people get in. And I'm sure you've had some like conversations with people being like, oh yeah, it was just as bad, 10 times worse than what we had with you.
Yeah, especially like the code reviews. Like they thought that, okay, I've done my own projects. It's super easy. I should be able to get it up and going like within seconds. But no, like it's like I had one individual went to work for a company and I know the manager. He's very strict on it too. And he's like, yeah, I'm happy I did this with you first because I understood like the quality and all of that I had to go through. Because without that, I would be struggling even more. I was like, yes, I'm not super strict, but I am where it's like, hey, like we need to make sure that this adheres to our standards. Like these are the standards that we agreed to. We did a high level documentation of what we're going to do, and this team agreed to this. And so by setting that standard, then they're like, okay, like we're okay that you're, stopping your PRs for quality checks or ensure that we have unit test coverage or whatnot.
Love it. Okay, so we've talked a ton about Gridiron Survivor. I don't think we've defined what it is yet. I kind of want to give it over to you to kind of give us an overview. What is it? How long has it been running? Maybe what's next for it? Stuff like that.
Yeah, so Gridiron Survivor is an apprenticeship program that I came up with after talking to many junior developers, self-taught individuals that could not get a job. Also, their portfolios just weren't good enough. And so by identifying that they had this missing gap, they had no idea what Agile was. They didn't have any idea of how to, fix merge conflicts or anything like that. I realized that they just don't have real world experience. And so I was able to talk to my friend, Rudy. He does an NFL Survivor pool, and he does it with a spreadsheet. And I was like, bro, this would be so great if it was an app because I feel your pain taking care of this. He sends us manual emails every week, 2 times a week. He sends us text messages reminding us to make our picks if we haven't. I'm like, how are you sending me this message? Like, it's not automated. Like, you're personally messaging me. And there's like 100 to 150 people. And if there's 70 people that are missing it, you are manually texting us? He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, let's fix that. And so I asked him, can my Discord team of junior developers, as I'm leading them, build you an app? We own it, but you use it for free. And so he said, yeah, go ahead. And so I said, awesome. And so we set forth to build a SaaS product for Gridiron Survivor. The first phase was so that Rudy can use it with his team. And then we can get some data and figure out how to fix the patches and whatnot. And then next year around, we could create a way to make this a SaaS product where you could buy seats. I mean, obviously, we'll have a free version, maybe up to 10 or some individuals you can add on. But having it so that it's a paid service and then also adding AI into it, because as we know, sports individuals, they love AI, analytics and all that. And if we could build a model that can help them decide what teams or based on their selections from before, what they should be choosing, I think that'd be a win for those individuals. But the apprenticeship program itself, I saw that there was a need to fill in this gap from boot camp to first job. The process was missing, the communication, the ability to go and interview and stand out. That was missing. As I was talking to many of these individuals, I said, I wouldn't even hire you. Like, not even for an internship. Like, I would have to handhold you for months just for you to onboard. Like, I don't have time for that. Let's see if we can create a little program here that could jumpstart that. And so that when you go and talk to these individuals or hiring managers, they can hear you speak these terms, right? When you say Scrum, when you say Agile, when you say merge conflicts, when you say ESLint, when you say TypeScript, like all these things like interface, like bringing these keywords up, it's music to our ears. It's like, oh, you're not so junior. Like you actually know, you've been through some things. And with PRs and all of that, like being able to have substantial evidence of them like having experience was key to me. And so I instruct them, I say, when you go into this interview, make sure you bring up Gridiron Survivor somehow, some way, at the beginning, the middle, whatever, because this is going to be your standing piece. Because your personal projects, sure, that's cool and all, but this is the one. You tell them what we've been doing, and they're going to say, you actually have real experience. Like you've gone through all this, and you have somebody that's in the industry that's teaching you guys all this. You actually have more experience than you think. And that's what I want for them. Is I always say, I want you to get kicked off this project because you got hired on.
That's super cool. So you've been running it for how long? Was it? I think you said 8 months or something like that, 6 to 8 months.
Yeah, I think it's been about 8 to 10 months. Slowly, the Christmas season was like a wash.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, about 8 to 10 months. Yeah.
So is it the same group of people the entire time, or have there been people being kicked off and added and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. At the beginning, we had, I think it was about 8. One individual at the beginning, I think it was like 1 or 2 months in, he got hired off. He was a superstar. And for me, when I know you're ready, I'm going to refer you, right? I'm going to push you out and say, hey, you need this person. Like, if you don't hire this person, you're going to lose out on a really good person. And I think that's key too, is a lot of companies are removing their apprenticeship program. And it's hard because it's like, 1 out of 10, right? Like it may be less than that, right? Like maybe less than 10%, that's a hit rate. But you're missing out on potential superstars that will stay with your company because you gave them the first shot, and they'll stay with you for like a decade long, because they'll work up the chain and they'll be a great person for you. After that, we added 4 more. Some dropped off because of work, because I tell these individuals, like, this is just a side thing. I can't pay you. We're actually net zero, but this is you gain experience from this. You can put in your resume, your portfolio, and whatnot. If you don't have time for this, that's fine. Just let us know and we'll balance it out. And so every week we'll do our availability. And if you're not available and you have a ticket that's dependent on another feature that's coming up, I'll slide it over to somebody else that's available. And that way we can keep the train going. And then I think it was about 4 months ago, another individual got hired on as an intern because they've been with the program for 4 to 6 months. And I foresee that there's going to be probably 3 more individuals within 3 months here that will get hired. Like, they're picking up quickly, they're learning really fast, and they've gone through the grind. And for some other ones, it's going to take time, right? Like I was speaking earlier, some learn slower, or some I misjudge too. At the beginning, I just say, hey, who wants to join? I just grab whoever wanted to join. And I didn't really test them. And I was like, okay, cool. I think you're good. I think you're, at this level. And I misjudged some individuals. And I said, oh my gosh, like, I gave you a feature that was meant for a high junior, but your skill level is like a newbie, like super newbie. And I misjudged that. And so I would give them a simple coding test to kind of figure out where they were at. And it proved true that they couldn't do some simple things. So I said, you know what? Let's scale this back and give you some bugs and some simple tickets to go through. That way you get used to the code base, because there's so much to learn with committing code, with the sprint board, with communication, with PRs, all these things. It's not just coding at this point. There's so much happening. And so by scaling that back, I knew it was going to take these individuals a little bit longer to learn and get to the point where I could refer them and whatnot. But I was willing to wait for that, because if they were willing to give me time, then I was willing to give them my time to teach them, to guide them, and to hopefully get them to get a job.
It seems like a lot of work on your end as well, because just full disclosure, I've actually participated as a mentor in one of these programs before. It was called Bridge. I was essentially in your role for like a smaller project. It wasn't like a full SaaS business. And it was surprisingly a ton of time. And unfortunately, like I feel like I failed them. The program itself fell apart. And I had like my small cohort that I had to continue on. And like we had a 50% higher rate. I was pretty happy with that. But the last, stragglers that were left there, I feel like I failed them. And that's been one of my bigger regrets probably in the industry. And that's when I saw your program, I was like, holy crap, like you're doing it so much better than I did. And I know how much work it takes. And I don't know how you're doing that. So first of all, like, thank you on behalf of probably all your mentees. But on the other side, like, how are you doing that? Like, how are you balancing the work life plus mentor balance?
Oh, man. And adding my family too. I have 4 kids and my wife and all of that. Like, there's so much there. One of my goals has always to build residual income. And like, I'm a ideas person, right? I have a lot of ideas. I do a lot of things and my wife hates it. but I always tell her like, hey, one of these is gonna, go big one day. Like, trust me. just like, some things don't go, but hey, you know what? You never know. This one is one where I feel really good about. Like, not that it's gonna blow up, but that I'm helping others. And I've always felt that if I can change someone's whole entire family's net income and trajectory, that I'm willing to do that, because I'm Hmong and we're refugees and my parents came with nothing on their backs, right? And we're super poor. And I had to work my way up, and we all did, and all that stuff. So I'm like, you know what? I'm a senior engineer at Microsoft. And if I can help you some way, somehow, and you're willing to take the advice I'm giving you, then I'm willing to help you. Obviously, granted with availability and whatnot, but I'm more than willing to do that. And if you're willing to work hard, I know you'll do fine. And so that's kind of mentality I've taken is, like I hope that this does become something, because I can see it where I build this project for right now, and then we move on to build another SaaS product, right? It's just like a startup. You keep continue to build a couple until one really actually hits, and you're like, okay, cool. One of these actually did it really good, and we're doing fine. Now it's a full-time business, and we can continue to hire people or whatnot. I think my ultimate goal is to create a program where I can pay these individuals to work on this project. That way they can earn and learn at the same time. Because when I talk to these individuals, they're like, oh, I only have, 4 or 5 hours or 10 hours here. And I'm like, that's cool. Like, give like however much time you want to give me, that's totally fine. But if I could pay you to do it, they would learn so much faster, because they wouldn't have to take a second job. They might be, be willing to spend, more time on just completing some tasks because they're getting paid to do it. And that intel helps them because they're learning faster. And as we know, the more you code, the more you fail, the more you learn, and it repeats the cycle, right? But if you don't have that time and availability, then it's going to prolong your success. Like, just going to take you longer to get to where you're hireable. And so I'm hoping that this apprenticeship program will become something. I've got a lot of traction on it. We have some sponsors as well. They give us some free seats for their services and whatnot, which is great. Obviously, I want to get to the point where we have a pool of funding so that we can pay these individuals. I really don't want anything right now. Like, I just want these individuals to be able to gain the skills, learn it, have some income so that they can offset all the time they're giving into this program. And then if one of these SaaS companies becomes something where we get funding or we get acquired, then that's cool. That's where I'll rake in my piece. But I really want to provide for individuals that are kind of lost. Like, I see them as like, oh, I graduate, now what? Go do it yourself. It's like, how do you do that? Like, without having an apprenticeship or a mentor that actually cares. I think that's the other thing, is having a mentor that actually like can guide you I've heard of other individuals that had mentors where they're like, oh yeah, go learn some design. You're a developer, learn design because it'll help round you out. And I'm like, dude, you don't even know like React very well yet. Like you're gonna go learn design as well. I think you're gonna spread yourself too thin. Like let's learn something else if you want to learn that. Because by learning design and you're not a good designer or you're not going anywhere towards UX, it's not going to help you. It's cool to learn it, but it's not going to benefit you. And so by having somebody that can understand who you are and where you're going, that's going to be key. Case be told, the individual that was hired 4 months ago on my program, he wanted to become an engineer. And as we were going through high level design docs, I hate planning, I hate writing docs. I don't know who likes it. But he did. He was like, I loved it, Shashi. I love planning. I love researching and stuff. I was like, do you hear yourself? You love writing documentation and love planning. I think you should become a technical writer or technical engineer. He's like, what? Like a docs engineer. He's like, are you sure there's something like that? I was like, yeah, there is. Like tons of companies are doing this right now. He's like, I didn't even know that existed. And he switched gears. We, had him go write docs for our storybook and everything. And the company he went to hired him as an intern for a technical writer.
Honestly, like the journey that you're creating for these people is going to be really important. And one thing I want to ask, like a lot of our audience is junior developers, where can they kind of participate in this? I don't know if like you're probably not like opening seats for the Gridiron Survivor, but can they follow along? Is there a possibility for them to look at code? Like how would you recommend people from outside of this group to be able to follow along or participate or do something similar even?
Yeah, I think if somebody wanted to do something similar to this, that'd be fantastic. Because right now I only have 10 individuals, and there are thousands of others, out there looking to do something like this. Our project is open source on github.com. If you go to Let's Get Technical, we have a Gridiron Survivor project. You could follow along on our projects tab. We have our sprint board there that you can look at what we're currently doing, and then our pull requests as well. Like we have a ton of pull requests there. I always say this: if you want to see what we're doing or kind of want to see how strict we are with our pull requests, look at the previous ones that are closed or even the current ones that have a ton of comments, and you'll see like what's happening and why we're so particular with the way that we want things. And that is a way to learn too, because a lot of individuals say, oh, I'm good enough. And I'm like, okay, let me see your code. I'm like, you're not good enough yet. Like there's so many things you can improve on. But if you learn, you can learn by looking at PRs. That's one great way to do it. And then the other side thing is like, yeah, but if you want to create a project like this, that it would be fantastic. Obviously, having somebody experienced to lead and to run this is really helpful, and because there's just some things that you just don't know. But an experienced individual can come in and say, okay, here's the plan, like here's what we're going to do, and I'm going to guide you along the way when I can. I think that's the key, because we can't be blind leading the blind. You're not going to get too far. But if you have someone that's experienced that can say, hey, like, let's stop here, let's take a shift and let's go this way or that way for good reasons, then it's going to really help the journey along.
Honestly, that's perfect. I think I've seen like live streams and stuff like that. Is there anywhere where you can view the live streams? Is that just on X or is there other places?
Yeah, on X, you can go to my account, Shashi Who Codes. But then on Twitter, if you go to Coding with Shashi, I have a lot of live streams there. All the live streams are on there. I stream to X, to LinkedIn, and to YouTube. So on YouTube, it's Coding with Shashi. You can look at all the streams. And it's really nice because if you look at the beginning ones, like I always explain what it is, but then we'll go into project planning. We'll look at the sprint board. Sometimes we'll have guests come on and answer some questions about breaking into tech or just random questions about development in general. So there's lots to learn there. Obviously the live streams are really long, but there's pieces in there that are very valuable. And to also hear how these individuals are learning, because I'll ask them mostly towards the end, we'll do like a recap, and I'll ask them, how's your week? What did you learn? How did you feel about this? How did you feel about that? This way they can also express as a learner what's so good about learning together and learning in a program like this.
I think there's going to be some people out there like just listening to this and they're going to have like a group of friends that are also aspiring junior developers that are thinking of, what, let's all like group up guys and like try to make an app and let's try to kind of make our own mentorship almost like group, right? Nothing official, they're not going out and maybe even being influencers, let's say, or streaming or anything. But the one thing I had a question with that is like, if there is someone else doing that out there, do you think that if they're all juniors or all aspiring juniors, is there any like sort of risk there? Like, should they try to seek someone out that is a senior? Because like otherwise it's juniors mentoring juniors. Is it almost like an echo chamber in a way where it's like, yeah, let's just all use var instead of letting const or something, like something ridiculous. It's like, this is going to be fantastic. Let's use this older way to do it. And then, do you see potential like pitfalls there? Like, what do you think on that type of thing?
Yes, I do, because there are just some things that aspiring developers, they just don't have the knowledge for, or yet. Experienced individuals have gone through the process, the communication issues, have failed a lot to have success. And without that experienced individual, at least one, it's going to be very difficult to find any sort of success. I've seen some projects where there's a few aspiring developers and they pull requests out and they're just like, oh yeah, this is good enough. Let's let it go. Let's just do it quickly. Let's get it done. And the end projects, it looks fine. But when you look at the framework and the code and stuff, you're like, what happened here? Like, this is like, there's no standards here. Like, this is just like a hackathon, pretty much, getting it up quick. And I'm afraid to say that is a way to learn, but a good way to learn is if somebody can review your code and stop you and say, hey, like, let's make this better. This is a great start, but let's adhere to our standards. Or, hey, you know what? This looks great. Let's create a post-merge ticket to come back and make this better. We'll let this go through, but let's come back. Or let's plan this. Let's put now this post-merge ticket as a tech debt item and come back to it later. By having those understandings, it's like, oh, so you're saying it's not good enough, but we're okay to go forward and stuff. Like, yes, like there's certain processes that experienced individuals know of how to use and get by. Without having an experienced individual, I could see that where it's the learning is going to be building stuff and building something up, but the true learning comes from when you have gaps, right? And you fill those gaps with knowledge, and then you start to learn. An experienced individual can stop and say, hey, like there's this piece, like it needs more work. Let's go down this path to help you all understand how to increase your knowledge in this area. Because as an aspiring individual, they may not know that, be like, oh yeah, that you're fantastic. You're an A+ player and we all should get hired in 3 months. It's like, actually, probably not. It's a great stepping stone, but to have the true learning, like to have a mentor come in and really guide you down the right path, that's going to be key.
For the developers that don't have a mentor right now, the juniors that are trying to get in, I guess, yeah, they're just getting started. They don't know what to do. They're at the point where they're like, okay, we've heard all this, Shashi, thank you, but we can't join Gridiron Survivor because it's full. We'll follow it along. Is there any suggestions you have for them for A, finding a mentor, or B, like getting around not having a mentor and still going down the path of being mentored?
Yeah, there is a path to go about doing that without creating a project, is to go to open source, right? Finding open source projects that have maintainers that are active. These usually have some individuals that already adhere to their styles. And by doing that, you can learn as well. The other one is if you really want to create your own project, is to build in public. And to build in public, and then also like just ask in public, say, hey, we have a group of 4. We want to build this project, but we need a mentor. I know of some people that are actually looking to just like help people out. And obviously it's tough because you need a consistency, but it is something. It's better than nothing. Maybe they can have the framing for you, and then you can continue forward and then ask individuals to help code review or whatnot. That's kind of why we build in public. It's not that I'm not there for them, but one reason is to gain exposure, right? To gain the exposure of what we're doing, but also these individuals. I always say building in public is key because no one knows who you are. Nobody can see you, but there are a lot of people that are lurking. And when they have availability to hire, they'll know who you are and they've already seen your content. and they'll come and ask, knock on your door and say, hey, are you available? We have an opening for you. I've heard so many stories from my friends that have had this happen. One individual lately, she was building, and then this big company comes asking, hey, do you want to interview for a UX engineer role? And she's like, what? Awesome. And they're like, yeah, we've been looking at your content for months. And that's why we already know you. So the interview process was easy. And she's like, you don't even follow me. You don't even like any of my posts. And I was like, wow, that's crazy that they were watching from the outside in. Like, they didn't even give a hint that they were interested at all. But yeah, in the end, they're like, no, we've been following you for months, and we already know like your work ethic and stuff. We just wanted to talk to you and check you out and see if you fit our culture.
I did have one question about open source. So I read a guide like a number of years ago, I think when I was just learning web development. And one of the guides was, it kind of tells you, go through schooling, yada, yada, all this stuff. And then the path at the end is, okay, before you get a job, if you're looking for some mentorship and such, go to open source. But their suggestion in the article, and I don't have a source because it's been a long time, but basically what they were saying is you should look up something, really, really simple. So the example that they did, they actually went to an open source project, and they learned that one of them was going through localization. So there was a lot of typos because they were just, rapidly translating at the time. And so they went in, and fixed a typo, and it gave them the experience to like, okay, this is like a really big project, in GitHub or wherever it was hosted. They go in, they fix that thing. So it gives them all those experiences of like going through, doing the PR, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess my question is, you were discussing for Gridiron Survivor that, you may bring someone in and you may give them like, let's say like a level 2 task just for the sake of simplicity, but they're at level 1 or they're at level 0. They're just getting started. So if someone is solo and they decide, okay, you know what, I am going to go open source. Like I don't have like a friend or something that I'm going to work with. I'm going to go solo. I'm going to go open source. It's very easy because I did this right away. I went in, I looked at a couple of projects that I was interested in, and it's just like, oh, I don't know what any of this means. Close the screen, and it's like, I'm going to go back to making my to-do app. So what would you recommend in terms of that? Like, do you jump to a different project? Do you suggest changes? What's your thought on sort of like the difficulty that you should be taking on versus the difficulty of the task that the project demands?
This is a very good question, Matt. This is what I would suggest is find a project that majority of the stack. Why I say majority is because there is no project that you're going to know 100% of the stack. I've been to so many companies, and some of these companies use like these third-party services that I'm like, I've never even heard of this, but I had to learn it, right? And anything that you go into, that's what it's going to be like. It's like, oh, here you go. Here's a React application. It's class components with Redux. It's like, I didn't learn that in school. Like, yeah, but now you have to learn it, but at least React. And so now you can, okay, I can reverse engineer this and learn it. Because by having some familiarity, it's going to help you at least understand a little bit of it. But even then, like the construction of the application is not going to be what you think it is, right? As you build your own project, you are the architect. You know exactly where everything is. If I build it and you come into my code base, you're not going to know where anything is. You're going to have to learn it. But at least you know React, you know TypeScript, you know kind of some things, and how they connect together. You just need to know how this application is architected and put together. That's going to help you a little bit more. And so I would say, and also for the level of task too, start with the easiest one. Because as a newbie, you may think that you can take on a level 2, level 3 task, right? But start with 1, because it's a lot more difficult than you think. Like if it's a simple one-liner, that's fine. But then continue to work your way up, because soon enough you'll find out that these maintainers are going to say, hey, you didn't add a type to this prop, and you need to go back and do it. Oh, now, and you're also missing a unit test, right? And then you're like, I've never written a unit test before. And it's like, yeah, now you got to learn it. And it's going to take time to adhere to the standards and all this stuff until you get better and better and better at it. Then you go on to the next level. But if you've done like, a few, 4 or 5, you're like, okay, it's a breeze. Now let's go on to a harder one. I'd say that because as you jump into a more difficult one, it's going to take you longer to learn the standards of that project and of these individuals that are reviewing your code. Until you have that chemistry, understand what they're looking for, things are just going to take longer. And so the smaller tasks are so much easier to learn from. A half-day ticket might take you 4 days to do because you're learning the process. And as you get past that, now you go to a 3-day ticket and it could take you 6 days or double the time just because it's going to take some more time. But as you do more of those, it's going to, the scope of the project is, and the time it's going to take is going to come down. And so everything in coding, that's how it is, right? Like, it's a bug. It should be fast. It took 3 weeks. It's like, what happened? Because we just don't have that knowledge and know-how of exactly how to fix things or exactly how to find solutions. But the more we do, the more we're going to learn.
I think that's going to help a lot of the individuals out there for sure, because I feel as though there's going to be quite a lot of people like in our community, we've had a lot of people actually like career transition. So they've been, a welder or, whatever, car mechanic, etc. And then they go, I'm going to transition to, coding of whatever, desktop apps, web apps, whatever. And they're not going to have a community yet, right? Like they have a community of people that weld or whomever. And so when they go in and they're like, I'm going to try this coding thing, for an hour a night or whatever the grind is. So I think that's really sound advice. I've always been curious about that because I was that person where I was like, I'm closing this. I don't know what these things are. I'm going back to my to-do app and then I'll go deal with my customers later.
Yeah. Tiana, on top of that, you brought up a good point because you're going to feel uncomfortable, right? You're super comfortable with your own project and the things you're comfortable with because you built it or you already know how to do it. A lot of these projects and a lot of companies that you go to, you're going to feel so uncomfortable. And that's good and that's normal. That's meant for you to learn and to grow. And as we spoke earlier, onboarding and having somebody to guide you and help you, that's going to help a lot. But the uncomfortableness is a part of it, right? Until you get better at it, and you will, if you put the work into it, you will get better and understand it. But again, having some commonality is going to help, and then learning it so that it becomes comfortable.
I was going to actually ask one more question actually about that sort of comfort level too. Is I've noticed, and I think Mike and I have actually said this. I hate to be the guy to bring up AI, but AI is a thing now. And so some people are going to say, hey, I'm going to do the open source thing. I'm going to do this and that. I'm going to try to get into a mentorship group, whatever path they choose. But let's say they go, you know what, though, like I could use this AI thing as a mentor. Like I can ask it for help. I can use it to boost my productivity. And then I use it, for sure to get help with stuff that I don't understand quickly. What is this, et cetera, et cetera. And even creatively with brainstorming and things like that. So like somebody may ask it, I'd like to make a portfolio for this type of role. What type of practice projects should I make and showcase? And what should I build in public, et cetera? What's your take on AI then in this sort of role? Like it's going to make mistakes, but so are people. And so that's going to be an argument. Do you think that it's safe or unsafe to use AI as a mentor, really? As a mentor, I'd say probably unsafe. But as a resource, I'd say yes, 100%, because I use it as a resource right now. The issue is going to be this, though. As an aspiring developer, you're not going to learn like how to find these solutions. Gridiron Survivor had this issue with unit testing, and we asked AI. AI gave us some bogus answer. And I was like, okay, let's do this old school way. I took that command and that issue, the error that popped up, went to Google it, found some resources, found the answer. The old school way. They're like, wow, like I didn't know you could do that. I'm like, yeah, this is how we used to do it. Because AI is not perfect, and it won't be. Like it's gonna give you some things that may help, like 60% of the way or even further, right? But that's the thing, is you have to be careful with AI. If it's a typing issue, like sometimes I'll have a prompt, I'm like, hey, like create types for me. Perfect. It does a perfect job. Okay, cool. It just saved me like 20 minutes, right, to figure all this stuff out. Thank you. That's a great place to put it. But go back and learn like what it did. Why did it choose this type and whatnot, right? Because if you can't explain the code, then you won't understand the code. So some of these individuals in Gridiron Survivor, they'll do that. And I'll say, tell me what happened here. They're like, I don't know, AI spit it out. I'm like, then go back and learn it, because I'm not going to accept this, right? And so they'll go back and learn it and tell me like, okay, cool, perfect. Like, I don't care if you use AI, but please learn it. Learn what it's doing, what it's outputting, what it's trying to give you, because that's the whole part of learning. If you keep trusting AI, then you'll never learn how to build sound solutions. And some people on X have even said they've completely turned off like Copilot and all these other sources
because they don't like it and because it hallucinates more than not. And that's true, but it is helpful for certain cases. Sometimes like I'll use it, I'll do the autocomplete and it somehow magically knows exactly what I'm talking about in a whole function. And I'm like, are you listening to me? Like it's 20 lines of code perfectly. I'm like, wow, this is great. But sometimes it gives me stuff that doesn't work at all. I'm like, okay, but I can recognize that, right? As a beginner, you might not recognize that. Be like, oh, this is great. I'll just move along with this. But no, like go back, understand the code, truly gain the knowledge of what it's doing. And in that way, as a resource, I think it is very useful.
Yeah, that's a perfect summarization for juniors on AI, honestly. But really appreciate you coming on, Shashi. Don't want to take up too much more of your time. I kind of want to give you kind of the red carpet to talk about anything you have going on, share any links you have, anything you want to say, essentially.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for having me as well. It's been a pleasure to talk to you both about mentorship and about the things that I'm doing. Again, I'm creating this apprenticeship program called Gridiron Survivor. That's actually a project that we're building. You can follow along on YouTube at Coding with Shashi. You can click on the live link. We do a ton of live streams there. And then also on that YouTube channel, I'm going to start creating more content. One of the first series I'm going to create is a Developer 101 series. It's what to expect and what to do when you forget your job, right? Now what? Pretty much like what to expect. How do I level up with these next 3 to 6 months? What to expect and what should I be doing? And then aside from that, I'm going to create some UX engineering content as well. And, on X too, I've been helping a lot of people do code reviews, project reviews, portfolio reviews. When I'm available, I open that up. And if you ever see that, definitely post your things there for me to help look at and whatnot. And I'm always open to connect too. So definitely connect with me. I'm Shashi Who Codes on X.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Shashi. We'll have all those links in the show notes, so you can definitely go and check them out. And highly recommend, again, we've been connected for a while. If you're looking for an actual good review of your stuff, Shashi is the one I would recommend over even myself. So throw it over to him.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks a lot for being on. It was really, really insightful, and I hope that a lot of the aspiring junior devs that listen to this will get going. I mean, straight up, just get going. Well, I hope that you enjoyed that interview as much as we did, but it is time to end. But before we do, remember that you can get featured at the end of each episode of the HTML All the Things podcast by going to our Patreon. That's patreon.com/HTML All the Things. And you can become a $3 tier patron, just like these fine people: Tim from the Web Hacker on thewebhacker.com, Jason from Geek Life Radio via geekliferadio.com, Garrett Segal, Level Up Financial Planning via www.levelupfinancialplanning.com, and Magnus from YesWeb via yesweb.se. And last but not least, again, we would like to shout out Michael LaRocca, a contributing author on HTMLallthethings.com. His blog can be located at selftaughttxg.com. Feel free to leave a comment or a review on the platform that you are listening to this on, and this outro will sign us off.
You've been listening to HTML All the Things podcast. Web development, web design, and small business. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. And we hope you appreciate that we talk to you like human beings. And we hope you had some fun. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit us up on social media. On Facebook, Instagram, and Patreon at HTML All the Things. And on Twitter at HTML Everything. Until next time, this is HTML All the Things, signing off.